Hello and welcome to my PSVR2 Remap guide for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. Now, like a lot of you, I bought the game on launch day, and since the VR patch dropped, I've been modifying, tweaking and developing a remap scheme for my VR2 Sense controllers. Now, I've noticed that there's a lot of people on social media asking for help and advice how to set up the Sense controllers, so I decided to post a guide on Reddit which seemed to get very positive feedback, and that has prompted me to make this video that you're watching right now. So before we begin, there's a few differences between the VR Sense controllers and the DualSense controller that can make things a little bit tricky. So for example, the DualSense controller has a D-pad, whereas the Sense controllers do not. The DualSense controller has a clickable touchpad, and unlike the Sense controllers, the DualSense controller can remap buttons with any other buttons. So for example, you could do L1 with the cross button, which you can't do on the Sense controllers because they are seen as two individual devices. If we take a quick look at the DualSense controller, you can see that you've got the four face buttons: L1, L2, L3, R1, R2, R3, and then the D-pad has left, right, up and down, pause button, touching the touchpad, then you have X-axis on the left stick, left, right, Y-axis, up, down, and then the right stick has the X-axis, left, right, Y-axis, up, down, and then on the touchpad you have swipe left, right, or up or down. To compare and contrast, we can see that the left Sense controller has got square, touch square, triangle, touch triangle, L1, touch L1, L2, touch L2, L3, touch L3, X-axis, Y-axis, and hold L2. The right Sense controller mirrors the buttons available on the left Sense controller, with the X replacing the square and the circle replacing the triangle, and the addition of a pause button that we can use. Before we dive in and have a look at what's changed, let's have a look at what has stayed the same. So you'll be pleased to know that the flight controls have remained untouched. So you have your ailerons on the left stick, left right for turning, and I recommend adjusting the sensitivity on this axis for a better flight experience. The elevators, which is the pitch up, pitch down, remain on the left stick, up, down, and again I recommend tweaking the sensitivity of this control for a better flight experience. And the rudders have remained on the right Sense controller stick, left, right, and again these have been tweaked for a better experience. Additionally, the left and right triggers are still used to interact with switches and dials. Your L3 will still activate the VR menu, R3 will still toggle the laser pointer, and you'll find your brakes and your radio comms are still on square and triangle. This is the sunny island of Corfu, and we find ourselves today at Kirika Airport using the Boeing 737. So you're flying along at 10,000, you want to descend to 5,000, you grab the altimeter and oh no, it's jumped to 15,500. Now you've got to crank it all the way down to 5,000 if you can. Very tricky, especially trying to do this mid-flight. You see I'm struggling to get it to 5,000 there. I'm sort of jumping past it and then under it, and eventually I get it to 5,000. Now, as an alternative, what you can do is you can squeeze the right trigger, and then using the circle button to increase the value and the X button to decrease the value, you can now smoothly get to exactly where you need that figure to be, and you can do it step by step or continuously, and that works up and down the range. You can also do it from a distance using the laser pointer, again with total accuracy. And this works on any dial. All of your switches work exactly the same as they did before, either by touching them or by pointing at them with the laser pointer. And if a button has got a secondary action, for example the barometer here, you can highlight it, squeeze the right trigger and then press R3 to interact with that. You can see the altimeter changing on the display there. Another example here is the overhead map. You can switch from a close-in view to a wide view, and these controls are mirrored on the left sense controller as well. So we're using hold R2 and circle to increase the value. On the left sense controller, that would be hold L2 and triangle to increase the value. Likewise, to decrease the value, we're using hold R2 and the X button. On the left controller, that would be hold L2 and the square button. For the secondary action, we're using hold R2 and R3, and on the left controller, that would be hold L2 and L3. I would recommend turning off the tooltips because the UI gets in the way. Plus, it's more immersive when you've actually got to look at the instruments. We're going to swap the circle and the X buttons around so that circle is used to increase the throttle and X is used to decrease the throttle. It just feels more natural to push the furthest away button to increase a value and the nearest button to decrease the value. Holding R1 and clicking the circle button will increase the throttle to the next detent, and holding R1 and clicking the X button will reduce the throttle to the next detent. While still holding the R1 button, we can push the right stick forward to have direct control over the throttle. This will allow us to have a more hands-on flying experience. Bringing the stick back to the center position will idle the throttles, and this is great for a landing where you can come in and then just sort of drop the throttle back, then pull the spoilers on, put the reversers on, wait for them to brake the aircraft, turn the reversers back off, and then retract the spoilers, all while holding the R1 in throttle mode. I decided to use the throttle axis 0 to 100% so that the throttles are active from the center stick position to all the way forward. This frees up the center position to all the way backwards for other controls. You'll also notice that we're mapping the exact controls to throttle axis 1, 2, 3 and 4. This will allow us to fly anything from a single engine Cessna all the way up to a 4-engined 747. I've given these axes a slight dead zone so that we don't accidentally trigger the throttles whilst we're using other controls that require us to hold R1. Since holding R1 for throttle mode is very much for hands-on flying, we also need access to the rudder. So this has been mapped to R1 plus the X-axis on the right stick to give us flight control. Eagle-eye viewers may have spotted that this was also added as a secondary mapping without the R1 modifier at the beginning of the video. And here's a quick reminder that both rudder controls have had their sensitivity tweaked for a better flight experience. And here is the mapping for toggling the spoilers that we used during throttle control by pulling the right stick towards us while holding R1. Now you'll notice that the actual binding is using the touch R1 as the modifier, but because of how the button listener works, holding R1 will trigger touch R1 because you have to touch the R1 before you hold it. This means that you can toggle the spoilers independently of throttle mode by touching R1 and pulling the right stick down towards you. For those of you that are using propeller aircraft, I've also added mixture control and propeller pitch. Now these work in a very similar fashion to throttle control, whereby pushing the stick forward from the center position gives you 0 to 100% control. You'll notice that the mixture and the propeller are inverted so that pushing the right stick forward pushes the control into the dashboard, which feels more natural. Another thing to note is that with throttle control, mixture control and propeller pitch, you can lock in the setting that you're currently holding by holding the L1 button and then releasing the controls on the right stick. Now, because mixture control and propeller pitch are used less frequently, unfortunately their key combinations are a little bit complicated. So for mixture control, you squeeze the right trigger, click in the right stick and then move the right stick up and down for control. And then for propeller pitch, you would also need to touch the R1 button. To toggle the autopilot, simply press X and circle at the same time, and to toggle toga mode, hold R1 and press X and circle at the same time. The default binding for trim was to push the right stick forward for nose down and pull back for nose up. Unfortunately, the sensitivity was too high and it would cause you to either dive or go into a near vertical climb. Additionally, letting go of the control would reset any trim that you'd managed to hold. Now, because there are no bindings for right stick up and a separate binding for right stick down, we are going to map the trim controls to touch R1 and push the circle button to nose down and the X button to nose up. This will give us step-by-step or continuous control over the trim and maintain the trim setting that we set. Using cockpit interactions to extend and retract the flaps can be a little bit tricky, especially when you're trying to fly the aircraft at the same time. You can see here that I'm struggling to get the flaps to fully retract. So what we're going to do is remap the flaps to R1 and R2 and then adding the X button to extend the flaps and the circle button to retract the flaps. You can see just how easy it is to do that now. And then all the way back just by pressing some buttons. You only need to do it twice per flight. So to extend or retract the landing gear, we're going to hold R2, R1 and click in the R3 stick button. Where the focus of the right controller is on cockpit interaction, the left controller is primarily about views and cameras. If you're sat squarely on your sofa but your view is offset to one side, you can reset your head orientation by touching L1 and clicking L3. Now I know at the beginning of the video I said that you couldn't cross-bind buttons from one controller to the other. However, there is an exception to this rule. By holding L1 you activate free look mode. It's very similar to holding a shift key on your computer keyboard, and what it does is it temporarily unlocks all bindings so that you can use another set of bindings, but make sure you do it whilst your autopilot is on because you'll lose flight control. Now this allows us to adjust our cockpit height using a combination of L1 and the X and circle buttons on the right controller. While holding down L1, you can use the left stick to move your position left, right, forwards and backwards. Make sure that you invert the X-axis, otherwise you'll be sliding left when you're moving the stick right and vice versa. To return to your cockpit seated position, you can hold L1 and click L3. Just be aware that this will also trigger the VR camera reset, so make sure that you're looking forward when you activate this. From the cockpit view, hold L1 and click triangle to enter drone view. While in drone view, touch L1 and click the triangle and square buttons to raise and lower the camera. The left stick will move the camera position and the right stick will rotate the camera. While using the drone camera, hold L1 and click the square button to enter fixed views. Fixed views are unique for every aircraft and are preset by the developers. You can cycle through the views by touching L1 and using the triangle and square buttons to cycle forwards and backwards. When you're ready to return to drone view, cycle to the first view and then press L1 and square to exit fixed views. To exit drone view and return to the cockpit, press L1 and triangle. You can create up to 10 custom cockpit views for each aircraft, but to do so I would recommend switching to flat screen and using the DualSense controller. Temporarily delete the bindings for cockpit quick view left on your DualSense controller so that we can use the L1 and D-pad left bindings. Next, bind Save Custom Camera 0 to L1 and D-pad left on your DualSense controller. Using your DualSense controller in flat screen mode, position your camera and then press L1 and D-pad left to save your camera. You'll then need to return to your settings to remove the bindings for Save Custom Camera 0 and reassign L1 and D-pad left to the next custom camera. You'll then repeat the process of positioning the camera and then saving your next custom camera view. You can save up to 10 of these custom views per aircraft. After you've saved your custom camera views, return to VR and assign L1 and square to load custom camera 0 so that we can access those views. Finally, we're going to assign load next custom camera to touch L1 and triangle, and load previous custom camera to touch L1 and square. Back in the cockpit, let's activate custom camera views by pressing L1 and square. We can then cycle the views by touching L1 and pressing either square or triangle. This view is a favourite of mine and the sense of being there is amazing. If you can break the camera outside of the aircraft, you can save a couple of exterior views as well. Pressing L1 and square will snap you back to the first view. Pressing it again will return you to the cockpit. Instrument views are a set of cameras that have been preset by the developers to help you navigate around the cockpit. To activate instrument views, we squeeze the L2 trigger, hold L1 and press the square button. This is the same combination of buttons that we use to activate the custom cockpit views, but with an L2 modifier. Then we use the shared touch L1 and triangle to cycle to the next instrument view, and the shared touch L1 and square to cycle to the previous instrument view. So L2, L1 and square to activate instrument view, and touch L1 and triangle to cycle to the next instrument view, or touch L1 and square to cycle to the previous instrument view. Activating instrument views will snap you back to the first view, and activating instrument views again will return you to the cockpit position. External view uses the same button combination as drone view but with an L2 modifier. So squeeze L2, hold L1 and press triangle. In this view you retain full control of the aircraft and it can be flown from this view. You can rotate the camera by holding R2 and using right stick up and down, left and right. R2 and R3 will reset the camera. When you're ready to return to the cockpit, just hold L2, L1 and press triangle again. Some missions use special equipment, so because they are mutually exclusive, we're going to add some shared button combinations to our controller bindings. And we're going to take advantage of the availability of the right stick from the center position to all the way down to add a trigger-like effect. The workflow for agricultural aviation is fairly simple. You take off, you fly to the field. When you're over the field, you toggle the sprays on. When you're not over the field, you toggle the sprays off, and then you return back to the airfield. To toggle the spray, you squeeze the right trigger, hold R1 and pull the right stick down. During aerial firefighting missions, you'll fly to the fire, drop your water payload, and then if you need a refill, you'll fly to the nearest water source, land on the lake with your scoops open, refill, take off again, and rinse and repeat. The controls for dropping the water are exactly the same as toggling spray, and because the timing is crucial, you can squeeze the right trigger, hold R1 and then at the precise moment pull back on the right stick. Because you can open and close your water scoops at any time, it uses the slightly more complicated combination of holding R2, touching R1 and pulling the right stick towards you. The workflow for aerial advertising is slightly more complicated, but there are still only two controls. You take off, and then you lower the lead pole. You then fly at low level to catch and pick up the banner. Once you've completed your advertising route, you would return to the airport, and then at low speed and low level, you would need to precisely drop the banner and then raise the lead pole before landing. After takeoff, you would lower the lead pole, and before landing, you would raise the lead pole with R2, touch R1, and pulling the right stick towards you. To release the banner, you would hold R2, hold R1, and then at the crucial moment, pull the right stick towards you. In skydiving missions, you'll be asked to get the jumpers ready by turning on a red light, and once the conditions are right, you should indicate that it's okay for them to jump by turning the light green. The window for getting the jumpers ready is quite large, so this uses the slightly trickier combination of holding R2, touching R1 and pulling the right stick towards you. Also note that input repetition has been turned off. Squeeze the right trigger, hold R1, and when it's time for your skydivers to jump, pull the right stick towards you. Also note that input repetition has been turned off and set control on release has been turned on. If you want to turn the light off, just squeeze the right trigger, hold R1 and press X and circle together. And again, input repetition has been turned off. So we've been pushed back and we're now ready to begin our taxi roll. Parking brake off and away we go. Now luckily for us, Microsoft were generous enough to make it so that the rudder controls also affect ground handling, so we don't have to find another stick access to bind to nose wheel steering. Out of the box, the steering on the ground can be a little bit twitchy, but hopefully if you've been following along with this guide, you've adjusted your sensitivity of the rudder axis to mitigate this. The next problem is that the brakes are pretty much an all or nothing type of affair, so you'll either come to a very abrupt stop or you'll have to be continually tapping the brakes to try and apply a feathered brake. Fortunately, there is a solution to this, and what we're going to do is bind the left and right brake axis to the Y axis of the right stick, which was previously used for trim. Bind the left brake axis to the Y axis up and down on the right stick and set inverted to on. So that we don't accidentally apply the brakes, we're going to give it a little bit of a dead zone. Bind the same right stick up down axis to the right brake axis and give it the same dead zone as the left brake axis. Congratulations, you've just created taxi mode. This is how it works. During taxi, push the right stick all the way forwards and roll the stick left or right for turning. This improves your precision. Anytime you need to slow down, just ease the stick back towards the center and you'll apply a small amount of braking force. This means you'll have far better control over your speed and avoid the dreaded taxi overspeed penalty. If you need to apply more braking force, just continue to pull the stick towards you. Anytime you want to turn taxi mode off, just dab the brakes with the square button. And unlike the default bindings, this isn't going to mess up your trim while scrolling in the electronic flight bag using the right stick. While we're taxiing along, here are a few more bindings to add to your control scheme. When you're on the ground, you can step out of your aircraft and walk around, by holding R1 and pressing the pause button. You can then press the X button to toggle run and the square button to crouch. To auto start your engines, hold R2 and press the pause button. Note that input repetition and set control on release are toggled on. Holding R2 and pressing the pause button will also turn your engines off. Note that input repetition and delayed input are also toggled on. To toggle visual assistances, hold R1 and click the R3 button. While holding the right stick forward in taxi mode and rolling the stick left or right to turn, you'll subtly apply a small amount of braking as the X values decrease to help you round the corners. And when you do come to a stop, you don't have to have a mad scramble for the parking brake to avoid accidentally rolling on, as 50% brakes will be automatically applied. But if you do need parking brakes, simply press square and triangle. Thanks for watching my video. If you found it useful, give it a thumbs up, and if you want to catch my next video, make sure to subscribe. Bye for now.
PlayStation